City of Flagstaff to order at 6:02 PM. And we will take roll call as soon as Sarah is ready.
Ally Applin?
Here.
Ally, we didn't hear you.
I'm here. Can you hear me now? No?
Sure.
I can see your light, your bubble turning on, but Elsa's going to check some settings really quick.
He did say here, so something is.
Oh.
Can you say something, Ally?
Can you hear me?
Don?
Keep talking. We're trying to get the talking on the room fixed.
Can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
You can see on the captions. So. Sorry.
Hello?
You try again.
I'm trying.
Yay!
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay. Yeah, it keeps says my, yeah, okay.
But
It's our fault.
Ally,
I'm here.
you're here and excellent at testing audio. Thank you.
Okay.
Hey,
Yeah. You want to pull up to this?
you mind if I-
No, please.
Paul,
Here.
Meyer, Tina Berger is excused. Alicia Chi. Abel Estrella. Dirk Gorman.
Yeah.
Lee Garcia.
Yeah.
Izzy Garrettson. She's here. Oh, she's here. She's in the lobby coming in. Robert Hamilton.
Here.
David Hayward. Michelle James is here. Julie Lead. Rick Miller. Tom Pearson.
Here.
Walter Phelps. Not here. I think he is planning to attend. Kim Robinson. See Kim online. Kim, are you able to unmute? Kim, can you hear us? I'll come back to her. John Van Landingham
Here.
and Bosick. Here. All White is excused. Christy Miller. I'm gonna text and see if I can figure out why she's not able to.
For that, I'm just stuffing my face with grapes. That's all of us.
That is everyone, but I'm gonna kind of count who is here because I think she can hear us.
Anyone like to do the land acknowledgement? Especially if you haven't done it already.
Not making eye contact.
I'm happy to do it.
Got it.
Eula?
You find it. City of Flagstaff humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of this area's indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands, still inhabited by native descendants, order mountains sacred to indigenous peoples. Honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will forever know this place as home.
Commander in Chief, what has she got? Stepped out?
Yeah, she was just texting Kim, but we can move on to the part.
I was kind of hoping she might kind of give us an introduction of how we're gonna work through all of this.
I just calling Kim real quick. She's, doesn't have her microphone working. She'll be on in a couple minutes. She needs to switch devices. Are you ready, mommy? Yeah. You're ready. Sorry. All right. So, the meeting tonight is what we call the parking lot cleanup. As we've been working through the 7 chapters of the 8 we're working on, we've been making a list of things we weren't quite ready to talk about or things that we wanted to come back to. 3 of those have been resolved by some of the previous online conversations or meetings we've had, but we wanted to start to work down the list. So what we prepared for you is just some reminder memos to get our heads back into exactly what content we wanted to remind ourselves about when we put things on the parking lot. And we'll get through as many of these as we can. I know that Michelle is maybe still stuck at council right now, so we might have to reorder these a little bit. It's a busy night at city council and we have a busy agenda, and so people can't clone themselves and be in 2 places at once. So Erin got here, might be able to move up some of the water things. So if you'll just bear with us on order as we're trying to be as many places as we possibly can.
So that would be items B. B might get moved to the end.
Yeah, we might just move them down until Michelle gets here. She is planning to join. She just is at council first. So if Elsa wants to start off with the significant natural resources map, which is, you'll remember the significant natural resources map is in the resource stewardship and resilience chapter. We have a current one that has good things about it, but it also had some difficulties on the side. So Elsa has been meeting with agency partners from our natural resource agencies, including NRCS, the Forest Service, Arizona Game and Fish. Trying to think who else, the Park Service. Who else was been on the list?
The county.
The Coconino County, Forest Restoration staff, USGS, I think, sent us some information, and the Spring Stewardship Institute. So we've been out there calling in data from our partners and making sure what we have is the most up-to-date and available. And then in addition, we've been working on trying to discuss what belongs on a map versus what is mentioned as a significant natural resource but might remain unmapped, and also discussing how to clarify what we actually mean by identifying a significant natural resources and what is meant to be done with that. So we've been working through a lot of those issues. Elsa has like a couple slides, I think, present. Yes, and some more information. Yes.
Time when we pass this out, I was on the first one on the list there for discussion item. And I know you said that we were,
Sorry, that's Kim joining.
we did want to have some dialogue with the group as a whole about that. So I don't need to do it now, but I just would like to put that on list some.
So
Yeah, I think that's been marked as resolved, Tom, so that's why it's on the agenda.
No, it hasn't been resolved to my mind.
It's been resolved to the satisfaction of the rest of the group. So unless everyone wants to vote to bring it back up again.
In that case, I would like to say that I know in one of the early meetings, you said that if we were not satisfied with the mechanism of how things were going, we could revert back to the normal rules of order. Right about that? I would like to do that now. I would like to make a motion.
okay,
I don't think that's how we did it. I think it was my decision whether we did
Okay,
that.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that one of our very first meetings, because I wrote it down, that Sarah said if we were not satisfied with the mechanism for decision-making, we could revert to the normal rules of order.
Just to take a vote.
Yeah, we can take a vote. All of those who would continue to discuss item one that Tom has here on the agenda, raise your hands.
That's not how the normal rules go. The normal rules of order.
Okay, do you want to make,
Someone-
someone wants to do this, Tom? So I'm getting frustrated. We've discussed this ad nauseam. Anyone else want?
Normal rules of order say that the person who has the floor is allowed to make a motion.
So make
I
a
have the floor and I would like to make a motion according to the normal rules of order.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to pass this out to everybody. It contains the motion and an explanation of why I want to bring it forward. I'll let it get around. So after the last two meetings, went back and looked at both chapters, the chapter on transportation and the chapter on infrastructure and public safety. And I concluded that in spite of the fact that clearly, while
So if we're gonna strictly follow the rules of order, you have to make a motion and
I will just, okay, here's my motion. The Regional Planning Committee members request staff rework and expand the goals and policies of the infrastructure and public safety chapter to include improved and expanded capabilities for preventing, detecting, and suppressing wildfires and preventing and mitigating flooding. Use for reference, the comprehensive example established in the transportation chapter incorporating future requirements, technological improvements, aspirational goals.
Okay, then we need a second for the motion to be carried forward.
I would second Tom's motion if for no other reason than just to have the discussion we need to decide where we're at.
Discussion at this point, anyone wants to discuss?
Kick it off. I think it's clear to everybody here, I don't think anyone would disagree, that wildfire and flooding is the greatest existential threat we have to the people of Flagstaff. With that in mind, if you look at the chapter, at those sections of the chapter on public safety, see that there are only 3 goals and 6 very generic policies that are not forward-thinking or aspirational. Compare that with the transportation chapter, where there are 6 goals and 18 very specific and detailed aspirational policies. I think the public safety issues are at least worthy of the same amount of attention, detail, and aspirational thinking as are the transportation issues about bike paths and highways and so forth. So my motion is request that the staff go back to the drawing board using the transportation chapter as a blueprint or as a guidepost for making a new input that is both detailed, forward-thinking, and aspirational. I think we owe that to the people of Flagstaff to put our very best effort into wildfire and flooding as our most serious existential threat. And it's clearly only given very cursory treatment in the current chapter as it stands.
All right, so the way I'm reading it, Tom, is that you're saying that we're not doing a good enough job, and I think we are. And I think that we will work through the chapter. I don't know, you can say the same thing different ways and it's always going to be the same thing. So I don't see that as needing to kind of downgrade our current system just to put more words in there, do something that we're already doing.
Well, if we were already doing it okay, we wouldn't have sandbags all over town. We wouldn't have the threat of wildfire right now. We've got fires popping up.
That's your opinion.
So there is a better way of doing things. We need to think that through and put it in a detailed and as Sarah said, aspirational way to that chapter.
Does anyone else want to discuss this?
In the preparation of these goals and policies, was the flood control district involved? Was Jay Smith, Lucinda related to the wildfire and post-wildfire flooding? Were you part of those conversations, Jess, or can you offer any insight on that? I don't know if you stretch, but.
Yeah, I wasn't part of the conversations, but certainly ample opportunity for the flood control district. Forest restoration director as a part of the flood control district to review these at full opportunity and see their responsibility as providing input.
And then I believe when you was the one who, she had a call with the forest restoration manager and went through the material with them. I know, I wasn't at that meeting either, but they did do it.
Then on the city side, it's Neil Chapman, right? Is that
Correct. Neil and Paul Otrogi and Jerry Bills all were involved in reviewing it.
Ray Bills is the deputy fire chief.
And the fire marshal,
At the fire marshal.
which is a specific responsibility of the fire marshal.
So in the goals, there are, I think, 4 of them, and they're broad. So I'm trying to hear what you're saying, Tom, about being aspirational, adding more information, and trying to understand what that means in a text format of a goal. So when I read the goals, is it that you are wanting to split out for more emphasis some of these goals? Like, for example, I'm just looking at IPS 0.3. Provide high quality emergency response and public safety services, including law enforcement, fire, medical, and ambulatory transport services. Like, is your desire to break those out instead of lumping them all together so they're given more weight? Or I'm just trying to track like
Sure.
what the text would be, or where the gap, the specific gap is that you're.
I think those are fine as goals. The broad, as you say, the broad goal is fine. But each one of those needs specific policies, just as done in the transportation section. We need something about airport being better prepared for receiving a firefighting aircraft. We need something about the use of remote sensing, use of drones, the expansion and improvement of the fire department, better manning, better capabilities there. Those all need to be broken out and with specifics and goals so that there's actually something to sink your teeth into and work on.
Can I ask one more question? Is that an implementation goal? Those that you're suggesting, or you're suggesting those as policies?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the bureaucratic part of it. I just think the content somewhere needs to be in there, and it's not. It's left as a broad brush sort of hand waving thing that, gives good intentions, but it doesn't give specifics to.
I mean, I think, Tom, that's because this isn't a specific document, right? As we've discussed several times. Like the things that you're asking for are just not stuff that is appropriate for this document.
That's why I said, make it like the transportation chapter, because we already have it in the transportation chapter. We have an example
Yeah, that's
of how to do it.
There's nothing like, other than right in your head where there's this battle between sustainability and wildfire suppression.
I don't see any battle at all.
It's not, this doesn't.
Battle at all. As a matter of fact, I'm using their example as an example of how this should be done. I have not said anything negative. transportation chapter, only held it up as a good example.
I think everyone else, I mean, I'm certainly sick of talking about this and hearing about it at every opportunity. Raising it again and again with stuff that's just not relevant to the discussion. It's, not relevant to the plan. And it's not what we're trying to do here, so. If anyone else wants to discuss, we can keep on doing so, but otherwise we're gonna take a vote.
If I could soften the blow, we'll go, I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
It's fine. Just quick comment, and it's hard for me to track all the different meetings and all the different chapters, but, I guess the only thing that I would point out and or suggest, and maybe this is for the, ultimate author's hand is to try and have some consistency through the chapters of whether we're gonna stay at a 50,000 foot level or if we're gonna get down into the weeds, right? And so to the degree that chapters have different levels of detail as a whole document, that might be somewhat confusing, so.
Can I bring something up about that from the staff standpoint? I mean, so traffic operations have a very strong connection to land use. When we have, so for instance, in the transportation chapter, we talk about what might be comparable technology because the use of that technology lets us better manage the transportation system, which lets us have more efficient land uses, which lets us increase and do infill at a lower cost with less expansion of our infrastructure. Firefighting operations do not have that same, and the technology does not have that same connection to land use. We would not change how we manage a wildland urban interfaces design or infrastructure needs based on how we tactically respond to a wildfire. And so that is part of why some of that technology might seem like apples and apples, but it's connectivity to land use, which as we talked about last time, you guys would like us to call this the regional land use plan, is weaker. Not totally indirect, but several steps less direct. And it's not a decision that would tie to the key land use decisions that the regional plan helps the community make, which are annexations and zoning map amendments. So that is, I think it's a struggle, I think, because it looks like something we're silent on it in one chapter and we're paying more attention to detail in another. But we're actually, and that's part of why we're rewriting the introduction to the transportation chapters. We need to more clarify why some of those details are land use related so that that distinction maybe is clearer.
And that's also why we took out a whole bunch of the detailed stuff during that meeting as well.
Right, I have already kind of informed staff that we'll be rewriting the intro to the transportation chapter fairly significantly. You guys had a lot of comments, and so the policies though were maybe less so. So since we're in the policy section now, we're discussing in terms of, is there something we missed in the way the IPS goals were created and the policies created that needs to come back? I think your motion is really just to bring you back expanded goals and reopen this parking lot item, or to leave it as resolved.
So I think that's what I'd like to, Dan, do you have something you were going to say?
I just thought maybe your concern could be addressed in the strategies. I've spent my career working on fire. And it seems like you're very focused on the advanced technology piece. We addressed the fire department, if I recall correctly, from the infrastructure. We talked about expanding that and making the resources commensurate with the problem. So it seems to me what you're interested here is mainly in the consideration of advanced technology. Can't there be a strategy that urges the the city to continue to, what's the word?
Consider the use of.
Yeah, to stay abreast of advanced technology and where feasible, use it. That's just common sense to me to stay on top of the best.
That's Kim trying to fix her audio. It's just very loud.
Oh, I thought I offended the alien from outer space. Okay.
She's working on it. We're working on
And
it.
my last comment, Tom, is going to be when it came to things that I'm passionate about, culture, public art, beautification, things of that nature. I wasn't disappointed by the small little tiny piece that we were put in there, but I felt like standing on top of the desk and raising the roof about it too, that we should have a whole chapter on just that. But how it pertains to the plan, I understood, be a little bit more than some. So I backed off of it, understanding that land use is more for zoning code pertaining to like housing, things of that nature that are more important. And with that, I'll give it to David to take the vote.
We're going to. I mean, we have to consider the motion that, Tom put forward. So I guess all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. It's opposed. And the motion fails.
I don't think we heard from the folks online, though. Ally's online and Kim is online, and maybe Kim can unmute now.
What was the vote?
Let's count it.
Got it. Do it one more time. Maybe do it verbal and hand so I can hear.
So it's exactly as.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
it's.
So it would be a
we're by the
rewrite
way.
of goals and policies.
Yeah, we have to, the motion, so it
That's the motion, yeah.
has to be a vote on that motion.
So can we do the yays again?
Yeah, yay.
Verbal, please.
Aye.
All in favor?
Ally and Kim.
I didn't hear what you said. Sorry.
It's
I
a
vote
yes,
no.
voting yes. All the
Yes or no on the motion?
I vote no.
Ally.
Ally, this Ally. Vote no. Can you hear me?
All those opposed?
Aye.
No.
Kim said she did not hear the motion too. Can you repeat the motion for Kim? Not that I know that we're not far enough off, that it makes a difference.
Yeah, the motion is the regional planning committee members request staff rework and expand the goals and policies of the infrastructure and public safety chapter to include improved and expanded capabilities for preventing, detecting, and suppressing wildfires and preventing flooding. Use for reference the comprehensive example established in the transportation chapter, creating future requirements, technological improvements, and aspirational goals.
That Kim?
Can you unmute or no still? Kim, if you'll put your vote in the chat, I'll record it. But yeah, the nays.
Need to make us,
But I had 8 and 4.
So I liked what Sarah said about, someone was saying, right, about the technology. Maybe some language in, it talked about looking for the best technology, which I think would address some of Tom's concerns. Is that something you could take back to?
So I think we've done it. We don't need to discuss the matter any further.
It's not, the motion doesn't really say that. I'm talking about one specific thing that they could add. Staff look at it and see if they could add something.
Staff are taking everything.
I'll step it as a suggestion.
I would support a motion that was we voting on that.
That's right.
As long as staff hears it and if we get the right people, I think we could feel safe with that. Before we move on, I just want to say thanks to Tom for digging in and staying for the long fight. We appreciate, that's what these are actually for, is for us to discuss these things, whether we like it or not, or whether they go into 10 o'clock at night or not. Thank you. I know. High five. That's what he said.
Elsa, you want to take us off into the first agenda item?
Just a second.
So we have the significant natural resources map in the room. I'm showing it on my screen. There's also a version in the agenda and packet folder for this meeting for anyone online who wants to look at parts that I'm not showing on the screen. Sarah talked about at the start, data collection effort. You all have been in the meetings for that. We've also met with agency partners. We sent out a survey and we identified some of the resources that people agree are most significant, especially sort of springs and riparian areas and wet areas in general was one of the real top concerns that we wanted to map. On the significant natural resources map, also wildlife corridors are a really important one. And yeah, we've also mapped steep slopes and faults. And yeah, so I have a couple slides on this map because I know looking at the PDF is a little bit limited. So I do want to show that there's more detail than what you can see on the PDF. I have it as a level. So this is just to indicate that there's a level of detail here that goes beyond what's visible from the PDF. And when we're showing this map in the sort of a final version, there'll be an online version of it that people can really zoom in. So for example, this is looking at Thorpe Park. You can see different overlapping layers showing the alluvial soils in that sort of dotted shape. The pond, and then kind of the flag, the riparian vegetation surrounding it. And also, you can see the wildlife connectivity as a lighter colored layer. So these are just to indicate the level of detail. Some of the areas on the PDF look kind of speckled. A lot of that is bodies of water, so lakes and ponds and springs. So you can see an example here where those are more easy to see. So I want to talk a little bit also about our approach to this map and get some feedback from you all on whether this is the right approach, whether there's concerns and we should shift gears in any way. So the idea is there's some general guidance that we want to lay out for this map to make sure that it's really implementable. So we want to focus on areas of concentrated resources rather than sort of a scattered approach based on individual resources. And the desired outcome of that is to support functioning ecosystems where we can. And where it's possible to align these areas of concentrated resources to locations of civic space, parks, space. That would be what we'd be doing. That could be identified within a development or through like or something step down from the regional plan. So in addition to what's mapped, we also know that there are significant resources that there's not great data on private land or because of the resource and the way it moves around. We wouldn't want to have a fixed location on a map for it. So some of the examples of these are grassy openings, and prairie dog colonies, pond roof pines, and rare plants and soils. And in addition to thinking about how the resource moves around, we're also thinking about resources where we want a flexible approach to them. That's So we did, so similar to what was in the previous regional plan, there's a map and then there's specific explanation of each resource. And we included that in the packet. So I can also switch over to that if you want to look at it. But basically we've taken that, those descriptions and updated them. And this is kind of an overview because it is a lot of text resource, but so the idea for geologic faults is that they should be considered in the structural design of developments. For bird sanctuaries, we want to focus on open space conservation as a way to address that resource. For steep slopes and rocky outcroppings, we want to conserve the natural topography where possible. For riparian areas, we want to prevent construction in the floodplain, conserve natural features, fragmentation of these areas, and intercept or treat stormwater to limit contamination in those areas. For wildlife corridors, that can be another focus area for open space conservation and where disruptions to corridors are occurring, employing some mitigation through the design of whatever it is that's interrupting those corridors, providing an alternate route perhaps. And there's a priority area of the 180 crossing, which I can go back to on the map if we need to. So those are the mapped resources and the guidance that goes along with them. In terms of what's unmapped, the guidance for grassy openings is to focus on them in combination with rare plants through open space conservation. For the prairie dog colonies in urban areas, those colonies should be encouraged with Arizona Game and Fish assistance. In rural areas, colony management may be more of an option. So there's that suggestion to do a colony management plan. For large stands of ponderosa pines, the guidance is to maintain older, larger tree clusters to thin them as necessary and to avoid excavation below the tree canopy. And then for rare plants and soils, the ones to call out are Resby's milk vetch, sunset crater green tongue, and dacite and limestone soil types, and the plants associated with those. And the guidance encourages maintaining plant communities and soil condition and offering interpretation in public spaces to help sort of protect and highlight those plant communities. So that is kind of the background to our approach. And now I can go back to the map if there's any particular area where you want to look at or resource that we want to talk about. Do that.
I have a couple of comments. One, higher level even than this, which nice presentation. It's a much better map than we had before. Just the name of it, I would, instead of calling it significant natural resources map, let's just call it significant natural conditions. It seems a little funny to call it quaternary fault or a slow resource. So these are significant natural conditions. I agree we should look at them. So just a little title that made me gag each time I look at it.
No, it's the title in the state statute of what we're supposed to do. So it says significant natural resources.
Yeah, comply with it.
I could add and conditions and geological conditions. Maybe in it,
Just like it's formerly known as.
Said then, right? So if these are significant natural resources, right? The quaternary fault is not a significant natural resource. Stretch of the imagination, so why is that?
I think it's legally required.
It does say we have to show faults and geological features or something like that. It's got some language. It's a weird section. I mean, and so maybe we could show those a little bit. We could show those separately. I don't know that geological faults have to be on this map. Maybe we could look and see if there's another map that they are more appropriate for.
I mean, they're important for planning, you don't want to build something on top of a fault, so I have no,
There's no active, like, there's seismic guidance for construction. It's structurally designed roads for.
Play with buildings.
Yeah, it has come into play in some older mid-century buildings where they were built on a fault. And like, we got a structural engineering report a few years ago on a building that was from the 50s that looked like the foundation was from the teens, and we were like, how did that happen? And then we realized that whole strip of homes had been built on a fault, and probably all of their foundations are going to fail. And so it is a condition that exists, and we have seen homes have to have foundations rebuilt, but not ones from had those features.
You know the apartment complex that went up by the Fratellis on 180?
Yeah.
Built right on a fault. My geology friends were there from the Arizona Geological Survey dusting everything off.
Yeah.
And I did look at the geotechnical report, and it did reference, the geotechnical report had to reference like seismic information and other geological information. I don't know if it changed the design at all, but
The building, yes. it would.
Okay, it did
Very
change
much so.
something. It's not as like full across our landscape, but there are locations where it's relevant, but it could be that it doesn't belong on this map, and that's a fair,
Nothing to discuss about the map.
Yeah, just a couple quick things.
So let's go Dan, Michelle, and then Tom.
I seem to recall from our discussion, we talked about having you map the proposed wildlife underpasses.
I don't think there, besides the one down south of Munns Park, there are none currently proposed. There are many that are under consideration. So I don't have anything, I don't have a data. The Game and Fish and Federal Highways are working together, but they're doing it based on the wildlife corridor data. So I think the corridor data is the most current and relevant data.
The other question I have is that when you were working on this, you asked us to submit definitions for significant natural resource. And I'm wondering if you settled on a definition.
No, I don't think we put that together yet, but
But that will be something that will be in the document.
That gets to something I was thinking about was definitions, and then I just have points of clarification, Elsa. So since you included the 2 pages from the existing regional plan, talks about, for instance, grassy opening, providing habitat for a variety of different species, and goes much beyond your chart that you put. Your chart wasn't complete, and then there's overlapping things, right? And so are you going to use some of this language that was from the previous regional plan, current regional plan? To show that, because I feel much more comfortable with what this says than the simplification on the table there, because again, overlap.
I thought we had some feedback that the incorporation of animal communities in a grassy opening in an urban setting is a little questionable. Like the raptors we might see, but
Isn't this for the county as well?
I guess it is for the county as well. Yeah,
That's how I was looking at it.
setting that could be appropriate. Maybe that's more in line with it, but definitely there was some feedback that like, well, in an urban setting, are you there's always the question we get from Game Fish and Rick's familiar with that of like, when you create habitat in an urban setting, are you putting the wildlife at risk or are you providing habitat? And that's always, people who like animals think it's always habitat, but sometimes creating bottlenecks and risk for wildlife is something we need to be mindful of too.
Yeah, when I was thinking grassy openings are probably gonna be there, so it's not like we're creating them. I guess we can create them. I was thinking this was for the whole county, not just the city.
Yeah, it might be, I mean, grassy openings are often what's built, of course, because our resource protection overlay within the city emphasizes trees and slopes and floodplains. So the grassy openings in floodplains get preserved, but a grassy opening on a hilltop we're very unlikely to be able to preserve.
But so,
But in a rural area that it could be worth something in there for how the county wanna look at.
Depends How the county incorporates it.
yeah, and then you also have something that might be on the edge of the city that could have some of that stuff and still be on city land. I would hate to take all the wildlife stuff out for city land because
Yeah.
we have wildlife everywhere.
Yeah,
even in
and
the city.
in our more rural areas, it's definitely more probable that we can provide wildlife movement and habitat that's functional and doesn't create risk.
I could keep talking about that, but, another ask, Elsa, is what happened to, wetlands? So are wetlands on the map as a separate thing? Are they under riparian? What about wetlands that don't necessarily have riparian habitat? I'm thinking particularly of that, area that's a really important wildlife corridor that's on the new J.W. Powell extension area that is identified as a wildlife corridor and has lots of water in it a lot of the year. So I don't know if it would have actually show up as riparian habitat. Or floodplain, maybe it would show up as a floodplain, I'm not sure. About if areas are. I think those are important to identify too. If we have any data on.
Problem is, I think the data is really poor and spotty on
Oh.
that. I mean, if we were out in the Forest Service lands, pulling up their TEUs and getting the molluscal soils off of that list is pretty easy. NRCS does not have data yet on wetlands that would be comprehensive enough, but there are some efforts to get wetlands, interior wetlands better mapped throughout the West that might come to fruition in the future. I think that you just can't make that decision with the data we have.
So could we include that in that second category then?
Of non-mapped?
significant Natural resource mapped. And you know, I would think that some of the wetlands that might be ephemeral. Right, just like some of the springs are ephemeral, and I think it's important to note that even ephemeral springs are important to protect. And that I didn't see that word in here. Maybe it's in the descriptions from the last regional plan. I didn't see it in the.
One second, Michelle, Robert, you were raising your hand. Did you want to?
I was just wondering if it's appropriate to put dark skies as part of our resources on this map.
Okay, so I thought you had a two part of
This
this.
isn't about it.
Okay, let's just wait until we've gone down on the list then. So,
Yeah.
And I have Zoom.
and Rick, it'll be, sorry, because everyone's got comments, so it'll be Michelle, then Tom, then Robert.
Is this the area you're talking about?
Oh, sorry. But
I don't think it has roads in it.
Looking at the Rio. This is the Pine Canyon area, I think.
I mean, Rick, you probably know where that corridor is. It's on the extension of the J.W. Powell. It's not on the existing.
It's behind Little America where that plane is.
Yeah, but further south, it's closer to the airport. And the open space folks know about it because they've been talking about it for a couple of years. About trying to get money to buy it, so it's not produced, or developed, excuse me.
It's
I think she's talking about right in here.
he's talking about Hoffman Tank.
That's it, that's it. I can remember the name, thank you.
Hoffman Tank is in this green wildlife
Okay, great.
corridor.
Yeah, in the corridor, so.
And it does show that we have alluvial soils in there. So they may not be,
That's
they
good.
may be an alluvial soil and not a molluscal soil. And this is me going back to like when I was doing environmental planning. So I'm sorry for the non-eco nerds in here, but molluscal soils are the wetland absorbing peatier like soils that hold water like a sponge, and alluvial soils are deposited soils that tend to be sandier, but also can filter water and rainfall and are part of more of the ephemeral system. So I don't have a map of molluscal soils for within the region that's consistent enough, but we have these alluvial ones, and that's what we can map right now. So we could say wetlands with molluscal soils will need to be identified on geo reports,
That'd be
geotechnical.
great, or have it in
reports.
that second category where if you see it, if it's there, then it needs to be protected. And the last thing I'm gonna say is a emphasis again on what Diane said, which is definitions. I think those are really, really important. We talk about old growth trees, right? That's been that's been debated for 20 years or 30 years, my entire professional career, right? So what is that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just use the Kokanee National Forest's current definition of it.
What's their current definition?
It's in their regional plan, like, or their forest plan. It's like,
Not had to read that for a very long time. I'd like to get-
it's in a big binder in my office, but I haven't popped it open in a little
I
bit.
think the definitions are really important, and if we could review them, at least a subset of us,
Yeah,
I
we,
really like that.
yeah, what you were saying earlier about the text that's in the current plan, so we have taken it and edited it, and I have it in a document here that I'm putting on the screen just so you can see it. So we're gonna send this out, but knowing that you all didn't have a chance to read it ahead of time, we tried to simplify the highlights of it, but
Because you do have like at least 3 wildlife biologists here. I don't know. 3 of us, so.
yeah, so
But
we'll definitely get this.
then we were going over here.
Yeah, Tom, you were next.
Just a question about reservoirs versus lakes. I see Lake Mary's dark blue there. I thought Lake Mary was a reservoir. It's not a reservoir.
It is a reservoir.
Shouldn't it be light blue?
I guess so.
Yeah, this was the USGS data, but yeah, we can edit it.
Let's go.
Dark skies, I didn't see it mentioned anywhere. Is it,
We have a separate policy for dark skies, but yeah, it's not mappable and it's so, I mean, we have lighting zones in in the zoning code and that's maybe too much detail for this, but we do have a dark skies policy.
I know, I've.
Yeah.
But that, I was just wondering, if it's appropriate to mention it with sanctuary type things.
We could look, would you want us to like maybe outline lighting zone 1? That what the
Even just
suggestion is?
mention that,
You mentioned in the text that accompanies this map.
yeah,
So benefits to wildlife, essentially.
Last but not least, right?
Oh, bit of one more.
And then, okay, afterwards, yeah.
I have a question about the Audubon sanctuaries that are marked on here. I haven't followed their wording in a while, but there used to be a couple more sites that were included as important birding areas. I don't know if the terminology changed or not. You know, what was included in the Audubon sanctuaries, and if you had looked at Anderson Mesa, and then I'm spacing, I'm getting old. I can't remember the name of the crossing,
Logan's Crossing.
Logan's Crossing.
Yeah, they were on the old map.
Were,
They were called important bird areas, not Audubon sanctuaries.
and I
But, you know,
was thinking that maybe the sanctuary wording was taking a little bit of liberty with what Audubon had actually said. Thought I'd check.
Yeah, we did look at the have like data, and I believe it's for important bird areas, and it wasn't showing in their current data set that they had available, it wasn't showing those areas, so we went with the sanctuary locations. But it may be something that needs some more digging on.
I think it might have significance, especially for the Logan's Crossings.
Yeah, the local Audubon.
the third little bird cliffs that correspond to that.
What was your, is that, you good?
Yeah, so, just a side note, that high resolution map, it's a wonderful, is there some ways that users of the plan can get zoom in and see these wonderful details? Good. So just say yes. I guess I feel a little bit, sad about prairie dog towns. They do go out, I jog by a lot of them, they go extinct 7 years later, they're back, you know, so the places that's appropriate for them, they recolonize. Areas when people have translocated them, which you put as a fish. Remember about 10 years ago that 90% of the translocated animals die within 2 weeks. So translocating, mostly we spend money and it doesn't help prairie dogs. And it might have changed, maybe in the last 10 years, we've gotten better at it, but it's in some ways a waste of money. If we're gonna pave it, they're gone and we don't,
When they take them out to Babbitt Ranches, at least the black-footed ferrets.
it gets eaten some. Eat a few.
Is that the 99%?
Yeah, so I guess I don't really know what to do with that, but I just felt a little bad to make it sound like relocation is an answer, you know, it's kind of like if we fail, we fail, you know, sometimes we do development and it hurts some wildlife. And I'd rather acknowledge what happened than to say, oh, we did good, we spent a whole bunch of money.
Well, there are thresholds for relocation, like when we've talked to Habitat Harmony, Game and Fish, a colony to be translocated has to be large enough for translocation. Like we've had parcels that were coming forward for development and there was a population of 40 prairie dogs on it and they said, nah, just make a lot of noise before you start digging and they'll run off the site and go somewhere else, or they won't. Like, and that's what you'll do because it's not a big enough population to move. They tend to only move colonies that are 100 or 200 prairie dogs. It's really fun to watch them get.
Yeah, that's what I don't.
But yeah, so it's not that we're gonna save every prairie dog. I mean, we have a prairie dog colony right now at City Hall that's digging into the constructed slope, protecting a bridge. So I don't think we're saving those prairie dogs. They're cute, but somebody's coming for them sooner or later because they've chosen a poor place to live. You know, we don't want the bridge to fail in favor of.
Anything else, Paul?
No, I was gonna do the bird area spirit.
And right now, only Anderson Mesa shows as an IBA in Coconino County. Logan's Crossing is not listed, just so you know.
Alrighty, so we're 1 hour. We've done item A. We have items B through I to go. So I think we're gonna skip
Michelle's online.
Michelle. Thank you for gracing us with your presence, Ms. T.
Oh, hello. Thanks for letting me come in late.
Are you ready to go though? Need a minute.
Which item? RPO?
We on to 4B.
4B. Can I have 5? Is there one quick item you guys can talk about while I get ready?
We can definitely do C first. All right.
Yeah, let's do the open space map. You're pulling it up. Oh, good. Okay. So reminder up front in talking about the open space map, which I know we went over in detail. This is is that we are not allowed to show parks or open space on private land without written property owner. Remember that as we're having the discussion that did a lot of, there was definitely questions in March of like, were we really showing all the possible open space that we could show? And so we went back and we went through the real estate data and the Foots Trail data, and we revisited parks, recreation, open space, and we looked to see if there were forced access easements in certain places in the city and the county. That's what's reflected in the updated map that Elsa is showing. So this is truly kind of the maximum amount of open space I am legally allowed to put on this map. Now, showing, the map also says we should show needs, identified needs for recreation, open space, and parks and recreation. And our solution to this right now is just to show very large areas in which we have an interest in acquiring land, either the city or the county. That does not mean that all the land within those areas would be acquired as open space someday in the future. But it says here's directly the areas and the purpose for which we may want to acquire open space in these parts of the community. So it would come with language that very specifically shows we don't intend to acquire every piece of state land in this area. Would be looking for how to acquire the highest value, the highest concentration of natural cultural resources, or to meet some active recreation purpose or need. They're big, big bubbles.
All right, go ahead.
is the obvious, but JLUS.
Joint land use study? That's, you were involved in
Yeah,
that.
the joint land use study was a partnership between the county, the city, Camp Navajo, and the Naval Observatory. The county was the lead on the joint land use study. It's a federally funded study to really look at protecting the Naval Observatory and Camp Navajo's operations. And what came out of the joint land use study and follow-up implementation that is called MIS, Military Installation Sustainability, has been updates to dark sky ordinances for both the city and the county, and some more recent, a joint dark sky specialist position between the city and the county. So the permitting for outdoor lighting is seamless, the same in the city and the county, managed by the same people. And some open space preservation efforts, conservation efforts around Camp Navajo that even include the Rogers Lake Natural Area. That's what the JLUS, it's an amendment to the county's comprehensive plan.
That study have specific targets for open space in that area that's shown on the map.
I don't believe it had specific targets. No, it was just looking for minimizing encroachment of development around Camp Navajo.
And for dark skies purposes.
Yeah, for dark
of the
skies.
Observatory. They
Yeah,
didn't
but-
want to see, state, as we discussed, state land can be auctioned off.
So
They
it
didn't wanna see
resulted in
something
the, and it also resulted in tightening of the lighting zones for both the city and the county.
It does specify, there is a map that specifies priority acquisitions of state lands, but I understand why it's not here, but there is a map showing their priority of interest.
But one sec, Michelle, just Paul, because this was your item.
Yeah.
I want to keep in mind, but
Thank you. And I do remember now why I proposed it, and some of the big parcels I thought were missing are in, so thank you, it's great. So the big thing of the lower mile of Lower Sinclair Wash was not in the previous map. So like even your city's 2 blocks on Ellery Avenue, low riparian area, now, but it's in, so it's on the map. So this is vastly improved.
I have a question about names. I'm looking at the
legend.
Yeah, thank you. And it says the areas of recreational need, and that's what we just talked about, the JLUS areas, et cetera. To me, what the study said, it didn't say that we should put parks out there in terms of this stuff. It talked about open space.
yeah, maybe we should change that to areas of parks and open space needs.
Yes, please. If we could put open space in, that would be great, because that just.
Point.
Ready. Everyone's good on that one, and I think that means we've given Michelle more than the 5 minutes she requested. So. Good. Okay, we'll move on to the resource protection overlay then.
Okay, thank you. So we did a site visit, and I'm sorry, I haven't put up the date, with various members of the committee who had questions about kind of the origins of resource protection overlay, understanding kind of what the requirements of it are. And that was followed by a site visit to demonstrate some of the challenge that we're finding with what's happening in practice, not really meeting the intent of this portion of code. A policy had been recommended to further refine the City of Flagstaff resource protection overlay to prioritize the highest value natural resources in the context of efficient land use and hazard mitigation. Staff does not propose any changes to this, but I did want to check back in with the group that had concerns about the language to see if you were comfortable with going forward with that language or if you'd like to see it further refined. Thanks.
Joe?
I have some suggestions for further refining. It's not very many extra words. But what I've done is I've really studied the existing language that was proposed. Tried to think about how that would be interpreted in the future by people who aren't in this room. How would they understand that? And just tell you the steps I took. I thought of balance as a word that's not in there. And so adding balance in there kind of takes away the potential reading of the existing language to say prioritize the impacts on land for development and for hazards. So I thought of the word balance. And then can I speak for you?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, and then I was talking to Diane and she had the idea of the fact that that doesn't say protection anywhere. Seems like an obvious, but those two words, balance and protection. And then I went to the actual city code for RPOs and I looked at the purpose section and it uses the word balance. Seems like a good thing to maybe to some similarities there. So suggested language, I'll show you what we came up with two. And I'll just tell you what those are.
Do you want to share your screen? Are you logged into the meeting?
I'm not logged into.
Sorry, Mr. Michelle, was this part of the preamble or in one of the policies?
This is the policy that we're talking about right now.
Strategy.
Excuse me.
But I think the language, sorry to speak for you, Michelle, but I think, David, the language that Michelle is speaking of is the language in the where it says balance is in the preamble and zoning code. Is that correct?
It's in the purpose section. Is that considered?
Purpose. Yeah.
And so I'm looking at the language that proposed, talked about months ago. It's in the memorandum. And then I'm suggesting some changes. So here's one of them. This one, further refine the city of Flagstaff's resource protection. Already says that. Add this language to balance the protection of highest value natural resources. Blah, blah, blah. And then the other idea is to say the same kind of thing, take out the word balance and just say to prioritize the protection of highest value natural resources. Now, I still have a question about what highest value natural resources are. Because in the code, it talks about, it actually prioritizes them, right? And so are we talking about all of those or are we prioritizing the first two? Or, you know, when we use that word highest value, what are we referring to? That's a question of clarification. Do we need to define what that means?
You want to just add the word balance to that section? I think
Well, protection, I think is maybe more important than balance.
It doesn't make sense the way it is.
this is.
Could add 4 words, balance the protection of, or just say protection of. I'm in favor of balance the protection. Because I think that gives the right message to people in the future about what we mean by that. We're talking about taking all 3 of those into consideration in some kind of balance. And that's going to be very site specific, of course.
Sounds super reasonable. Does that make sense?
It seems very reasonable to me. And then
From a staff perspective, I really like the balance. Yeah, including that. Thank you.
Michelle, can you tell us what is meant by the highest value natural resources?
Yeah, and it is, I think, Michelle, intended to be the 3 that are regulated. And for instance, on the trees, and that's a little easier one for me to give an example of, is that right now we're not really prioritizing like large stands of trees and kind of even a development pattern within even a site that would really accommodate the protection of a tree, like a cluster of trees, rather than just one-offs that are throughout the site. And so it's kind of talking about things like that so that we're being very intentional about the resources that we are saving and making sure that it's clear. Another one is the steep slope. I think there is, and it would be part of any further refinement of the code, would have to have that portion that discusses the value and how that is being determined. And so I think that that comes at a later phase as we do kind of drill into the specificity of what code changes we're talking about. I don't know if that helps.
That helps, and I kind of assumed that. That would be the next step, but I just wanted to make sure when we say highest value natural resources, we're talking about all 4 of them in the existing code.
Yes.
The steep slopes, forest, and then other site features. Yeah. So can we define that, Sarah? Can we underline that and then have a definition so that there's not any confusion in the future? Right, that was all my comments.
That, you feel like we can check it as resolved then?
Happy. I don't know how the other folks feel who are on the field.
Alrighty. Oh. That means, yes, you're up.
Okay.
Do you know that you were presenting this evening? No.
And we do have,
Your name is on here, you know, so.
and we have Amanda Atchison, the county sustainability manager, also, in case I screw into this up, Amanda. Yeah, pretty simply, the committee asked back in April that do the energy chapter goal E1B, with a request that the county review the goal to consider how or if the county's actions to address climate change could be rewritten to reflect more direct action. And with that, a lot of county staff, both planning and zoning staff, sustainability staff, and then getting a lot of input from county management, coming up with what you see on this memorandum. Updated goal E1B and 2 supporting policies, E1B 1 and 2. I will let you know that the county is simultaneously updating the county's comprehensive plan. In updating comprehensive plan, we have a sustainability chapter, sustainability section in our old 2015 comprehensive plan. In updating that, we are really looking at a direction completely consistent with this goal E1B to create a separate sustainability plan. The way the county's comprehensive plan is structured, we have goals and policies throughout the chapters, and then we have an implementation chapter, and we list action items. The 2015 County Comprehensive Plan lists 24 action items. It's digestible. One of those included the renewable energy ordinance, which was a big deal and a big effort for the county. So what we anticipate, we have to let the process play out, is that the updated county comprehensive plan will include in those implementation action items doing a separate sustainability plan. And as it states here, that integrates current and developing energy and climate goals and policies designed to address and respond to climate change. So happy to take any questions, to back us up on any of the details.
So I think this is great. I think this is a great start. When you say sustainability plan, it kind of, it's similar to a climate plan, right? The city calls it climate, so that's great. You talk about energy efficiency in E1B1. Do you want to say anything in there about transition to renewable energy sources? Or electric? Or I was thinking about, what can the county do, like the city is doing, in terms of taking their buildings and putting them, making electric rather than natural gas and stuff to heat it. Is that something is that too much detail for this? Are you thinking?
I would anticipate, in all honesty, that this being the Flagstaff Regional Plan, the county's partner to, and then getting some direction likewise from the county's comprehensive plan, that sustainability plan, and whatever it gets called, would be addressing those. So I think we would let that detail take place in a strategic plan in the county sustainability plan.
Energy efficiency kind of captures the broadness of it. Okay, good. Thank you. That's my only question.
So on, and I liked 1B1, fine. 1B2, I just kind of stumbled. So food climate resilience, such as addressing food security. addressing food deserts. So what is a food desert? How are we gonna address it? You know, it just seemed like this thing like, what? And this drop out of the sky.
In the county especially, and that's
I had
a comprehensive level.
Hit all three things that bother, you know, the next resilience event resource, fine, infrastructure, fine, water security, nexus. Resilience hub, what's a resilience hub? What's community connectivity? So those are the three terms, the food deserts, resilience hubs, and community connectivity. You know, it's not like I'm opposed to them, I just don't understand how we would address a food desert, how we would address a resilience hub, since I don't know what it is. And how I would address community connectivity. I think maybe I understand that. That could be the foots, you know, I'm all for it. But, so. Help me out.
I think we can get definitions on those things. Food deserts is a term that a lot of nerdy planners have been throwing around for a while. And it further out in the unincorporated county, especially outside of the Flagstaff Regional Plan area, we have these where they currently don't have
5
any-
miles to a stinking mart.
Exactly.
Yeah,
The old takes a gallon of gas to buy a gallon of milk.
Okay, cool.
So that's food desert.
For it.
The resilience hubs is a concept that I think we could come up with a definition for. Actually, I think the city is taking
City has a definition.
Yeah.
resilience hub. And actually, food deserts and resilience hubs could come together if you're using resilience hubs for food distribution. Community connectivity, transit would be the most obvious and certainly the most energy efficient, most sustainable. But likewise, actually, the county is also looking at a county-wide multimodal transportation network.
I just don't want other people to have the same.
No, good. Yeah, thank
loss
you.
That I did.
Yeah.
We're doing here.
I really like the phrase resilience of energy sources and infrastructure as opposed to all electric. Because in our climate, when you have ultra cold periods in the winter and the electricity goes out, the heat goes out. So I think resilience of energy sources where you have backups to electric heating is essential.
Cool. Anyone else got anything? Or we're, what's the next one? Wondering whether we should take a little break, 5-minute break now or.
That's fine. We'll take a break now if you'd like. I think the next one's a little bit of a longer discussion.
Let's take a 10 and then we'll come back and do the social and economic systems.
Easier to pull it on. Interesting.
Let's, get back to it. We're gonna move into the social and economic systems comments.
I know.
If you guys have your parking lot, here, right there on this front page, has these bottom three.
Yes.
Everyone see that? So on this sheet, basically talking about these bottom three parking lot items. Kind of combine them into one piece right here.
Yes. And we gave you a memo that covered all three.
This is the.
So Michelle McNulty and I both were unable to be here for the social and economic chapter, and so several things ended up on the parking lot. For that, the first was discuss how zoning has contributed to the housing emergency. In what either this chapter or growth and land use. To have an implementation guideline. There's an implementation guideline under the affordable housing goal that says barriers and restrictions to the creation of missing middle multifamily housing and new development should be identified and removed in city and county codes. And would ask us to talk about that in more detail. And then also a revisiting of policy CD.2, support affordable housing through sustainably reduced development standards where possible. And they wanted to know more, and then also a note to provide a more detailed policy on financial strategies to decrease the cost of development and increase affordable housing production. So this was kind of out of order too, because we had the social and economic systems discussion, if you remember, and then Michelle came and presented on the last cap. And, or the last, and the land analysis and suitability study and the code diagnostic, which I think answers some of these questions, but then we wanted to make sure we brought it back and that we discussed what we should do with these three items. Michelle, do you want to add any material to this discussion? I'm just going to introduce it and let you take it.
No, I think you laid it out really well. And yeah, just kind of after giving that presentation, I think there's some things in that presentation that we can definitely add and are already drafting in the growth and land use. So I think that information will be there. We can speak about the barriers. You know, we kind of presented information about how different the competing, some things in our code result in our inability to even achieve the minimum density. So we can go into more detail about kind of where some of those competing interests are in general. So I guess from there, I know that the last item, and I'm going to skip the middle because I think we can go back to that, but the request for a more detailed policy on financial strategies to decrease the cost of development and increase affordable housing production. I would ask that it not be a detailed policy because right now that's what the CAP, the code analysis project, is doing. Is the first step was identifying what the barriers are in our code. The second step is to provide concepts on how to reduce and remove those barriers. And then there's the refinement stage. And as part of that, two deliverables that we will get is feedback from the consultant team on how we can better improve our both our housing as well as our sustainable buildings incentives. So I think a lot of that strategy will be coming out of those further documents. And then they're also providing us with a regional cost reduction for infrastructure kind of layout. And so we are getting these things. So I think maybe I'm curious if it could just be, you know, developing a policy for financial strategies to decrease the cost, or something about that, or to identify financial strategies, if that would be acceptable, or if not, please expand on kind of what that detailed policy would look like. Thanks.
I don't expect any changes or any additions. So we started to have a conversation at that meeting specific to incentivizing development. And then the conversation was, okay, we need to take a step back because there's some work underway that's happening and leave it for when that comes up as an important topic for folks related to incentives and affordable housing. So I don't really think that we need to discuss it. It was really just to say it's coming. We didn't need to spend a lot of time on it at.
Okay, perfect. And then I'm gonna go, no pun intended, but back to the middle on the implement guidelines about the barriers to the creation of missing middle and multifamily housing. And so, Rick, I don't know if we had a chance to talk about kind of what removing the barriers to code might look like specifically. I think in the presentation, I was able to demonstrate that there are barriers. And so when we say removing the barriers in code, it's just that. It is looking at where do we have policies that are getting in the way of our ability to achieve a specific type of housing and removing those code barriers. For instance, when we look, and I don't want to just automatically go to resource protection, it's just an easy one for me to kind of to use graphically, but you know, when you already have to reduce a site by 30% for that resource protection, and then you have setback requirements and height restrictions and all of these different compounding standards that you have to achieve, sometimes that means that results in not being able to achieve a desired density. And the desired density is often just what's the minimum that we're trying to achieve. And so it's really removing those conflicts that are not allowing us to get the densities that we're trying to achieve in the specific housing types. So I'm going to pause there and ask, maybe just, is that a good enough explanation, or do we need to talk more?
I think it's good enough.
Okay, thanks. And then I see that there's a note that I'm going to provide an overview. I wasn't planning on that, but I can. I have the presentation pulled up and I'm happy to share any slides, but just want to make sure that was the intent. Thanks, or expectation.
The last question I have, well, James had brought up that we should add information to the chapter on how zoning has contributed to the housing emergency.
So I talked about that in the beginning, and I thought we addressed that we were going to talk about that in the growth and land use, where we talk about some of those barriers that the diagnosis found.
Yeah, I mean, I want to read what it says in that chapter, but being direct somewhere, I'm happy.
Okay.
It just seems like a story that needs to be told.
Yeah.
People understand why there's need for changes in zoning. And I'm not sure everyone knows, like, kind of a geek about it. But so.
Okay, so if I heard you in that you're also a fellow planning geek and you want to hear more about kind of what the results of that study were to, you just want to see what the narrative looks like before it goes final.
The idea that zoning can actually prevent us from getting what we want.
Okay.
And I don't consider myself a planning geek, but I'm more of a housing unity geek.
Gotcha.
Lots of planning sometimes.
I know, we just spent a lot of time talking about mossel soils, and it's sure like, well, got a couple of geek flags over there.
Yeah, always have.
I just wanted to mention that the recent groundbreaking for the Habitat for Humanity houses over at Timber Sky. That seems like a real, would make a nice call out once, a success story that I don't know if you intend to do that, but I thought it was noteworthy that there are 40 Habitat for Humanity houses, but a total of 221 affordable homes or low income. I have no clue how that was achieved. I read that and thought, I think I should know why that's happened based on sitting on this committee, but I don't know how that happened. Yeah, so go ahead.
Oh, no, so it was actually 40 for sale. That's the Habitat homes. And then it's 221 affordable rentals. But
Oh,
happy to, if we could, I think we could do it as a call out. So how that happened was actually through the rezone process, and through the negotiations, of getting that, the rezone. It was actually a very iterative process, that turned out to be this really cool opportunity. And I think somewhat unique to Timber Sky in that it was a whole new master plan, community, which allowed us, the developer, a lot of flexibility and kind of negotiating with us because there really weren't neighbors, right? Like they're creating their own neighbors. And so it's kind of like, hey, you're buying into this. We have $1 million homes. We have moderate priced homes. We're going to have affordable apartments, and we're going to have these for sale affordable units. And it's kind of a unicorn opportunity, not to say that it can't happen in other developments, but to your point, it is very special. And I think we can do a call out, but that actually was a result of the rezoning process and the development agreement and those negotiations that came out with that. So there's probably a way that we could put something kind of concise together. Sarah, would you see that as being an issue?
It'd be a good example.
Okay.
It probably would balance that discussion of like how zoning has contributed, but zoning also has been a solution sometimes. It's not all one way or the other, but there's a lot of barriers. Like we definitely are conscientious of the barriers. We were just meeting with some property owners this week who are trying to get their density up and hitting maximums all over the place. And they said, we said, could we get, what is it keeping you from getting this to 10 units per acre? And they said, we can barely get 5 with all the restrictions. So there's lots of ways in which we say we want more density. To do that, we're gonna have to figure out how to keep our requirements from overlapping. And so maybe we can get a what's been the hindrance and what's been the successes kind of side by side.
Cool. Everyone feel good about that one?
Yes.
Hey, move on to F. Springs, I think, Michelle, this is your baby, right?
No, this is me and Erin.
This is you?
Oh.
Oh, I meant this was Michelle.
Oh, this was Michelle. This Michelle's, issue. Yeah.
Yes.
So Michelle.
Michelle with one L.
Michelle with one L had asked us to bring back just a summary of how springs and steeps were discussed. Any technical questions, I can't answer any springs and steeps question, but I can say that in the plan right now, we have a short background description of springs, steeps, and cienagas. We had a little internal debate of whether we have cienagas in the region or not, and turns out we do. They're not on private land, they're on Forest Service land, but they exist. And then, we're gonna put known springs and seeps on the significant natural resources map. There's always a part of me that on that map wants to put the word owned in front of things, because some of these things are, as much as we think we've mapped out the resources in the landscape, there's holes in that sometimes. And then we have a policy, our policy on conservation of significant natural resources, and language that says construction should avoid and mitigate impacts to seeps and springs to prevent the loss of habitat for wildlife and rare plants, and to prevent damage to buildings and structures. There's also a strategy in the water resources chapter that says support Spring Stewardship Institute in providing science and data that allows for spring preservation and protection as an environmental monitoring for aquifer recharge and watershed. So that's sort of what we have covered across multiple chapters, and we just provided you a summary of that. I didn't have any ads that we saw, but if you think there's a hole or something missing or something you'd like us to look into further, we'd be happy to hear what those are.
I found this really helpful. I had two thoughts. One, I already talked about that word ephemeral, because I want to make sure that natural water features include, it ties natural water features along hillsides like Observatory Mesa. Any of those are ephemeral. Somehow making sure that that's identified.
And I don't think we know which ones are permanent and ephemeral.
No, I don't think
data. We just know there's a mapped spring there.
Right, but there's ones that I come up with houses up there.
You want to avoid them either way because they're gonna be wet.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if we know they're there, we'd love
Yeah,
to
yeah.
when we're building people's foundations. No one likes a wet foundation.
No.
It's not
Right, so,
benefit anyone's structure.
so when it says these natural water features, does that in your mind include rural?
Yeah, if we know they're there, it does. But the problem is we've sometimes built tennis courts and not known they were there.
So
And then we spent money rebuilding tennis
So
courts.
and the map comes from a published source of information, so it's really limited to what they have. And I know that there are some ephemeral springs within the data set. So I'm guessing that some of them are,
right now,
it might be a way to distinguish them with a color symbol from the Spring Stewardship Institute database. Yeah, I don't know if they flag them.
it'd be great if there was.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that those are included in that definition. Again, it's, you don't want to build something and then find out that your basement floods.
I think including it in the definition of a spring is a better way to approach it because I agree with you. When we did the Plaza Vieja plan, there are springs that pop up in people's gardens every years. Those are very hard to get on a map because we don't know always where they are. Sometimes they kind of move down slope or they move up slope depending on what's going on geologically, miles away from where they actually are. So,
Include the definition.
yeah, I think including it in the definition is probably the easiest way, just because it is it's hard to map. It's like
That's
one of
great.
those
I just wanted to
difficulties.
have that word somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's related, so a definition is great.
But if anybody's geotech report ever came up and said there's a spring, nobody would just hop their house on it in this century. Last century, we did it a whole bunch. We just piped it into a basin. Yeah.
Last year was amazing on Summit Avenue.
Spring Street.
Spring Street is upcoming.
Yeah, Spring Street is named Spring Street because there are springs on it.
Lots and lots of water. So
There are springs on Spring Street.
only other comment I have, and this is maybe too nitpicky, but into the background for the water resource chapter, it talks about water sources specific to the city of the Flagstaff municipality. It doesn't talk about Emerald Springs. And so, Aaron, maybe you can say that you're defining that. It looks like it's all the sources that for our drinking water, right? Upper Lake Mary, spring water from the inner basin, groundwater from the sea aquifer and reclaimed. So you're just looking at what the city uses for drinking water there. You're not trying to mention everything.
That's correct.
Great, okay. Good. Thank you for putting this together. That really helped to see it all in one.
Sarah, she did the work. Memo, I'm like, no.
Don't you read memo? Yeah.
Thank you.
Ready, good. G is water resources, and this is the moment.
Yeah, so the WRB essentially, or balanced water demand and water supply. This first original goal was what we had provided. But the committee at the water resources meeting said, we really want to emphasize the 100-year water adequacy designation for the city. I think that the county is not in the same place and they don't require an adequacy designation currently. So we attempted to split these in a way that takes that into account. Feedback. Similar but different, obviously. I was trying to get to the goal in different regulatory.
You did a good job. That I still am disquieted about the county and water. Because as I said at that meeting, you've got this enclave of Flagstaff work bending over backwards for 100-year water supply and just go 10 feet over the line into the county. Yeah, it's just the ball game's different, but it's all robbing the sea aquifer for the most part. So there's sort of a big thing here that's not good. not that this document can address it, but we also talked about the Colorado Water Plateau group that is doing some sort of study. And again, I just want to bring up, we've talked about, are you going to cite some of these deep dive plans in here? Recognizing that there will be a lot more detailed plans. And anyway, I just want to keep our eye on that prize because it sounds like that's gonna yield some pretty important information.
I just had a quick question. If it's off the topic, then we don't have to address it. But when you talk about the water, balancing water demand and water supply, hitting 100-year water adequacy, but does the city have 100-year water adequacy currently, or is it just a statement?
We do have it 2013, April 1st.
We voluntarily got an adequacy designation as a city when we were working on the last regional plan. Not in a zone of the state where that's required, but we elected to do it. And then Aaron maintains that designation with a regular report to ADQ.
There is an option for the county, mandatory water adequacy, but I believe it requires a unanimous vote by the county supervisors to adopt mandatory adequacy. And then it requires every development over, I think, 4 lots. They have to get 100-year water adequate designation for their subdivision. And there are only a couple counties in the state that have done that. But I understand Coconino County, they discussed it when that was introduced, I think in 2007, as a new opportunity. And the county board wasn't in favor of it at that time. I don't know if they revisited it, but it's an opt-in program.
That's something that's built into the city.
And then the city opted for a municipal version.
I think he said it. How often?
Sorry, what was the shop? Let's just,
Sorry. Suggestion for adding something to the city goal. I think is important because it's mentioned in the original goal and it seems to be out of the proposed goal. It's also mentioned in the county goal. So my suggestion is to add at the very end of that sentence, support sustainable regional hydrology and the needs of riparian ecosystem. Those 5 words. And the needs of riparian ecosystem. So that gets it back at what the original goal talked about, ecosystem needs. And you could take out riparian, you could just say ecosystems, but kind of obviously riparian ecosystems. What do you think about that, Aaron? How that got missed.
It's not part of the state's water planning, but it can be something that we point to in the regional plan. Considering projects in the inner basin, and it's like, hey, the regional plan says, and ecosystem needs. Maybe we work with Abe Springer to restore some of the landscape to benefit the spring and the runoff to the city. I don't know. So I think that fits.
I was thinking
Not within like the state requirements. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, that is, right?
it doesn't, I'm a little confused because I thought we were talking, I mean, this feels like something completely different to me.
What does?
than Actual resources stuff, right?
Yeah, what does the ecosystem need? So somebody would have to tell me,
Well, I was thinking
Hello.
riparian.
was it? Yeah, then we need, okay, we need 25 gallons a minute for the ecosystem. And so I guess it could be consideration by a council, but not a requirement. We sort of look at ecosystem needs on our own as the city of Flagstaff by running computer on aquifer pumping and impacts the springs along the Mogollon Rim and the Grand Canyon. feeding from the sea aquifer. And that's what the Coconino Plateau Watershed Partnership is doing. So, but there's no, you know, rule that we have to meet or no impact requirement criteria. So we're considering the ecosystem needs, but there's just no criteria for, well, what
Need.
yeah.
Yeah, well, I was thinking of it when I put suggested riparian, I was thinking move water to keep the riparians up.
To maintain the
But what I
plants.
don't understand the problem.
I'm suggesting,
So,
I'm just suggesting adding in some language that talks about ecosystem. Because that was in the original goal, and it's in the county's goal, talks about ecosystem. Why isn't it in the why is it not in the city goal?
I think the reason we removed it was because it's not tied, like it is a wholly separate thing from that adequacy question.
Is it somewhere else, another goal address that?
When we talk about riparian, as riparian areas as a significant natural resource, and that, I think that that could be enough information that if there was a possibility to do a project with water services that supported a riparian ecosystem, they could use the significant natural resources language to do that. But if you tie it with water adequacy, it's sort of a disconnected idea, like in terms of the resource management, like water adequacy does not include ecosystem needs, but it does include regional hydrology. So it's kind of adding on something that's not tied to.
Mind is all tied together.
I know, but it's not in the regulatory and technical landscape tied together.
For the city.
For the, yeah,
The
for.
county can put it in.
And how does the county
They do that.
view ecosystem needs and water topics come up?
but what sort of water topics are we talking about? We're talking about you guys drilling a new well?
Well,
Yeah, we're talking about supply and demand here. Water. Not necessarily water as a natural resource. This is about. And I mean, there are some overlap in those things, of course, but I guess the thinking was the significant natural resources language would be sufficient to support a project that we were interested in doing that supported riparian vegetation. So like, let's say we found another area where we could do beneficial discharge to a wetland or riparian area, and it was
Like the
close,
Rio de Flag.
like the Rio de Flag or something like that. We can use the significant natural resources language to be the support for that. Without it being here, because it's just not tied to our water adequacy, whether we do that. Or not. You know, this is it's the kind of thing that like we wrote it for the city in that combined way so that we could kind of do both at once. And then we made the implementation strategy to deal with surface hydrology and our water needs about that, the 100-year water supply. So when you asked us to move it up, it changes the context, right? So that's kind of one of, like, the request from the committee made it more disconnected from that idea. We did look at the other language and I think it does cover it, especially now that you've seen the natural resources map. That's just kind of how we would look at it in policy land.
I mean, I think if you leave it in there, we would, in whatever venue we're discussing water adequacy, let's say we're discussing the sea aquifer and our bucket of water. You know, the question might be, well, how much pumping are you influencing Sterling Spring? And then the city could say, well, actually, we've done above and beyond just a bucket of water, and we run our computer model not only for local sustainability, but for impact of springs. So I think that's how we could use it. For our Upper Lake Mary bucket of water on our paper water, we could say, okay, is that city council, is it drying up Upper Lake Mary, or is it leaving water for, you know, habitat? Benefit.
Michelle, Rick,
That's how I see it working, but.
And I may be reaching too far back in my memory, but I remember a lot of discussions about the sea aquifer and spine days. And that the problem in this was that, yeah, this end of the aquifer looks fine. You get down on the lower end, where the springs are supporting populations of endangered fish, and they don't look so fine. There are springs that are drying up, and it was being attributed to pumping from this end of the aquifer. And I'm not a good enough hydrologist to tell you that's good or bad or indifferent. I remember that discussion, and it was a lot of high-powered people with better hydrology education than I've got. But I do think that's a connection. What you do on this end does matter. It may be 60 miles downstream.
We've got Kachina Village and Forest Highlands between us and there, and anyway, they're on the other side of the groundwater divide, but those are questions that we can answer. I mean, if there's a question about, well, and what about ecosystem needs? We could say at least how we're addressing ecosystem needs, and if we're not, maybe like our city council or water commission or whoever could, well, would you please consider this? And then it would drive us to run the model differently.
There's language in somewhere in another section of the plan that talks about that, because I was kind of keyed in on the word balance, water demand and water supply. So if you're balancing it between the adequacy and then hydrology, it seems like you'd also want to balance it with ecosystem.
The ecosystem needs aren't quantified.
So is there language somewhere that talks about what you just said? Talks about thinking about pumping the sea aquifer and how it might affect down aquifer species, ecosystem.
The Coconino Plateau Watershed Partnership work is doing exactly that.
There's language about supporting that work.
Language about supporting that work.
I'll find the exact language for you.
Supporting the work the same as supporting the system, the outcome. They find the studies and they say something like Rick just said. Is there something in the original plan that says we want to address that? We at least know about that and think about that in this context.
I'm scrolling, but looking for what language we do have.
Just
We do have language under the implementation guidelines that they, under policy WR1 says ecosystem services, which is another term for ecosystem needs, and the language that the Colorado Water River Plateau Water User Group is trying to use in some of their recent reports. It says what ecosystem services in the watersheds that serve the region should be monitored and improved to protect the water quality of existing infrastructure. Maybe that's a place to say, and, deal with the awareness of, the ecosystem needs. Maybe it's better to put it there in the implementation guideline.
That'd be great.
Yeah, the ecosystem services, I mean, that is it's defining a criteria for the services or that ecosystems provide back to the communities, so that we have a quantifiable metric, I guess, to include in our planning decision. Better than that, but
Is there a suggestion would get at my concerns? Okay, maybe Rick's, if we put it in WR1.
Put in sample language, but we'll need to look at this more closely. I like to type something. I don't forget what we were trying to, especially at this point.
Yeah.
There's a lot of details.
Okay. Ready, let's move on to the water chapter comments from the Flagstaff Water Group.
Yeah, there were some comments from Robert Jane was the author who sent us these comments, and there were some we were able to incorporate and others not. Elsa went through and did most of this work, so I'll let her present. But I think this was a parking lot item that was from Anthony at the end of the water services meeting. If you'll remember, we hadn't had time. We were really running out of time. We didn't have time to go back through all of this group's comments. And so did go through them and wanted to bring back.
So, I won't exactly recite the memo, but there was a comment about calling out sort of who are the biggest users of reclaimed water and making that a little bit more specific. So we did adjust our sentence that was about reclaimed water zones. Didn't include a specific table or any data, but the committee could request that we put in like, you know, in this year, these were the top users. There was a comment, and this actually kind of tied into committee comments from the meeting about how we described the uncommitted claimed water and its use for aquifer recharge. And so we did clarify how we described that in the chapter, and added specifics on how much water is committed to different uses, as well as some clarity on release claimed water. Another comment was about how we described water consumption, and we accepted the edit that Robert suggested, which is to say that there's a long-term trend for a decline in per capita, which is per capita consumption, resulting in largely steady total consumption.
Pray for us.
And the next comment, just being a little bit more specific on the options of indirect potable use, direct potable use, and how that's connected to the Arizona Department of. That's what we accepted that revision.
What did we accept?
This was, go back to it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I got lost there for a second.
Yeah, there's kind of a scrolling list. We're moving too fast. Pause.
There was a suggestion to add or to replace an existing strategy, a new one, and it was, so the comment was putting forward the idea of parallel studies of Red Gap Ranch versus these other options of indirect potable reuse and direct potable reuse. And we didn't incorporate this revision because the way that this strategy was written could be interpreted to restrict city council's ability to make appropriate water resources decisions with the information available to them in the future. And then the last one was to add a strategy about treatment and the measurement, destruction, removal of hazardous chemical contaminants. We did not incorporate this comment because this is something that Water Services already is required to do and does. And we felt that water quality was adequately covered in other policies. If there's any particular comments here that should go back to in the chapter.
So I thought it was good, except I have comments on the last two. I guess I'll deal with the last one. City is required to monitor regulated and unregulated chemicals. That's true, including PFAS and water quality. So they're required to monitor it. They're only required to monitor them once every 10 years
No,
for the PFAS.
no, we've had to sample every year now for many years. Yeah, there are a couple different programs and the state has come and
Well,
done.
in any event, I thought it was some of those. I thought I read something that it was every 10 years and they're late this year. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The regulations do require you to measure how often it occurs. The current regulations don't require the city to investigate options to destroy or remove these chemicals. So there are no requirements there. Might be, certainly it's too early to require the city to destroy or remove them. I think it would be totally reasonable to start investigating options.
Well, the whole industry, I guess our pushback to that is our whole industry is investigating options every day and running technologies and piloting. And I've been to pilots all over the country for removing various chemicals for various reasons. So I feel it just is.
Part of your day-to-day operation.
Yeah,
Like, it's not, that's not a strategic thing that rises to this long-term level because it's just part of.
and saying,
Yeah.
you know, destruction. Destruction might not be possible of some constituents and or unnecessary with some constituents, depending on what we're dealing with. So I feel like it represents this idea that you can just get rid of everything with some simple technologies that we need to like learn about. But for us, the industry is doing that. You can come to the water reuse conference at the end of July here in Flagstaff and, you know, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just our perspective to,
Yes, I would just hope we're looking at these options. So I think it would be way over the top to say we must. And then this doesn't say that. That would be, we can't expect the city of Flagstaff to do this global task. But to start thinking about it, because there's so much we don't understand. So the sea aquifer's 1,000 feet below the ground, and we don't like billions of gallons or millions, but we don't know how much. We don't know what the pollution is. So I think we should be worrying about it. And I guess that's what I read this as. We should be worried about this. So I would like to see some language suggesting that.
I think this is because this is a public document, I think, you know that this is going on, but the public worries about its water and doesn't know that this is going on. What if you were to get rid of the word destruction? Because that seems to be broad, but just.
investigating advanced water treatment. So, I mean, we do that as,
Are you investigating?
um,
Just to reassure the public that I think that's what you're looking for, aren't you, Paul?
Yeah.
That reassurance.
I would love to add language on reassurance, and it's really up to any public water utility to be doing that. Water and sewer utility. So, I would love reassurance language, but I don't want to promise that we're always investigating advanced treatment technologies when we're struggling right now to raise rates for proper sewer treatment and proper infrastructure at our treatment plants. And so it's,
Seems like kind of like that we talked about with Tom's suggestion about technology. Just keeping up to speed on technology and seeing where you might be able to implement. Some of that might be regulated with PFAS. There's a whole bunch of chemicals out there that are not. Find a way to address those along with PFAS. You could do that. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I don't think there's so many things online about PFAS.
I mean, is the regional plan the place to do that again? I'll raise that question just as I did with firefighting technologies, but there are, of course, environmental impacts, but it is probably not technology that influences our land use or distribution. It does affect our environmental quality. And we do have a utilities master plan that might get into more of those. I think of them as difference between something that's strategic and something that is tactical, right? Like, to me, whether we're using drones and the most recent LiDAR and, the most up-to-date technology inside of our plants are all more tactical than strategic. And this is not a tactical document. It has strategies, but they are more overarching. And when we look at them as a whole chapter, we may cull them quite a bit. We may go, whoa, if we have 200 strategies, are we overwhelming ourselves with what we actually can accomplish in 10 years? Do we want to prioritize them? Do we want to do something different with them? And that'll be probably part of our discussions in August at the, but, there's just a consideration of like, there is a difference between something that's a tactical decision and a strategic one. And like ITS might be tactical, but it's tactical to get something more efficient on our land use side.
It is strategic to say remain on the leading edge of technology and incorporate it wherever possible.
That like,
Strategic.
that breaks my heart in a way, because remember we had the first goal I tried to send to the committee was all about using best available science and being the leaders in that, and then we struck it, so.
And it takes support, it takes funding, properly funding water and sewer utilities to be on the leading edge.
Yeah.
So if there is an expectation to be on the leading edge.
We're looking 10 years out, so maybe.
Sorry, Rick, you've had your hand up. Go ahead.
It's aspirational.
Yeah.
Isn't this what we're about? This is why we're here.
Yeah.
Having this discussion in this room is important. Having it in the community is vital. We've been arguing about Red Gap Ranch since I moved here in 1988. We're still arguing about it. We haven't done a damn thing about it, and there's a good reason for it. But this is part of having a discussion, is getting the information out to the public and being able to talk about it. Some folks on this committee think this is a valid thing that we ought to be doing.
Work on Red Gap Ranch every day, just so you know. It enters my day every day.
Yeah, I mean, and so I guess it's just, this is like a scope question, right? Like, in or out of scope is a discussion we can certainly have. It's, nobody's arguing whether incorporating the best technology and science is a good idea. We all think that's a good idea. Is it in the scope of the regional plan? It's certainly in the scope of this committee to have a discussion about whether that belongs in the regional plan or not.
Yeah, I think this is a good discussion to have, but it almost brings me back to the exact same point I made with Tom, to where we're basically saying that we're not already doing these things. These things are already happening at a lower level than what we're actually planning. If there was a problem at this level, Aaron was the problem, then we would definitely need to start pointing people in the direction to solve the problem. But since we know the problems on the side and the water side are really being handled appropriately, seems redundant to, let people know that we're, your streets are getting plowed and we're making sure that we check the oil in the engine of the truck that's plowing them.
So I will accept, the thing that was most convincing to me was that this is, the land use plan. And that monitoring, as important as it is to do great work with our claimed water, it's probably may not be appropriate to put this in the plan, but maybe Michelle can.
I would argue that right now, we haven't found any PFAS in drinking water. Correct. Found in wastewater, reclaimed water. So as long as we keep not finding it in the wells and everything, then we're fine. But what if we find it? So shouldn't we be addressing the possibility?
There are state or federal and state regulations that deal with that, but I understand our community wants to go beyond that and not even see anything.
Guess I keep coming back to, how are you gonna remove it if we find it? It's gonna be some change at the wastewater treatment plant, right?
Isn't that just, that feels like too deep in the weeds about what we're doing here?
Feels like, let me just say, Michelle, I feel like that belongs in a utilities master plan. Water.
We
master
are
plan,
kicking
which They're
off.
working on.
It ends up in there somehow, because
But it's so technical.
It's in there. We've been investigating advanced water treatment technologies since I started in 2012. And before that, we were attending the water reuse meetings. I was on behalf of the consulting firms, but I understand if you don't hear about it, I can see the public being like, oh my gosh, this is scary. It is. I wish we did more messaging about it.
saying
But
we need to do it at some point in years.
facilities master plan process would identify the need.
Once identifies it, 'cause
Yeah.
I think that could impact land use significantly if you have to
Mhm.
add stuff to the water treatment plant.
We always have more area around our water treatment plants than we're supposed to be using. That's really at the level.
Too.
Yeah, and I mean that, then it would come in with cost of development, right? Like we have a cost of development chapter and that
We're
might come
talking
into
with
play.
Trying to get federal funding, trying to get, I'll just say the word earmark, you know, where you start a feasibility process.
Some, so you might get some.
But I understand you want language in here that lends security, but I would love it to inspire investment into drinking water and wastewater systems as critical systems, you know, to provide safe.
Everyone feel like we've discussed. We've had a big discussion.
Was the conclusion that we're okay to not change essentially?
Can everyone live with that we do not include the change?
It shows up somewhere.
Detailed because we don't include it in this document.
As long as it's in another plan and we.
Our master plan.
Yeah.
If I get a chance to pitch it to director, I will and see if he can come up with something that's aspirational, that isn't so thick, I guess.
Yeah, that's all I'm looking for is aspirational.
Should we, and you're still up, right?
No, that's.
Was the last one.
You're still up, Aaron, on future
Okay.
water demand estimates.
I took a stab at, you guys are gonna laugh at me. I kind of took a stab at what I think you wanted to see, and it was, the supply chart, you might remember this was in the document, and you wanted it projected out by water source. So I just pretended that we're gonna see a repeat in how much water we have in Upper Lake Mary over time. That drives how much groundwater. The purple is interbasin spring water. So I know our team wants to ramp back up the interbasin system. It's in desperate need of repair. It's leaky, it's old. So purple water comes back up over time. Blue is Upper Lake Mary. So the fluctuation is just a natural fluctuation that we've seen over, in this case, about 80 years. So I just kind of repeated that fluctuation. The gray is water from Woody Mountain Wellfield. And the green is the Lake Mary Wellfield. We're trying to throttle back on the Lake Mary Wellfield because the aquifer in that area doesn't replenish as quickly as it does in the Woody Mountain or the local wells, and the orange is the local wells. So what we don't have on here is sort of what the water demand can be expected. And then I have to factor in our expected gallon per capita rate of water use declining because of our water conservation strategic plan goals. So minus having demand on here, I'm wondering if this was kind of what you were envisioning. Timeline here, this is 2024 right here.
I think it's tough to know what we're envisioning because this was Walter's request and he's not.
Yeah, Walter had tried to join, but apparently in so many technical difficulties, he couldn't.
I'm sorry, it's late in the day, I'm an old fart.
This is kind
So
of,
the 2024 onward, what is these projections, where are they coming from?
it's just kind of, I didn't want to just have flat lines of layers of water supply projected in the future. I thought that was kind of boring. So I just sort of said, what if we see the same fluctuation in Lake Mary water, which drives how much groundwater we pump every year? And I thought when the person asked for it that they were envisioning what we
had
might
planned.
expect the climate to be.
Yeah.
And that's really too difficult to do. So I just kind of monkeyed around with this and the time I've had here and just kind of repeated the patterns.
But you
How we-
also took into account some strategic conversations about which sources are
Yeah, we want to,
well and which ones might need to be scaled back and.
yes. And this,
If we're showing, I mean, I think if we're showing excessive detail for something that has an assumption behind it that's not that great, then I think we might be,
well said.
It's a good slide. That's a good.
that we might be defeating the purpose, right?
Yeah.
But I appreciate the theoretical optimization.
So, Rick,
Aaron, my reading is right, that what you're showing there is really that orange bar on top. We're gonna be heavily dependent on that from this point on. That's basically it, right?
So groundwater is the gray, green, and orange, and that is groundwater. We, in our designation, our adequate water supply, we have 9,900 acre feet of what we've termed sustainable groundwater pumping. And ADWR wrote off on that, submitted a groundwater model. And then after 9,900 acre feet, it would trigger a new supply like Red Gap Ranch or some other source. And in this case, I don't know what the demand is when we trigger the 9,900 acre feet, but that happened for a while.
All the weather predictions are gonna get more erratic. You know, larger storms, but it's in more infrequent intervals. So I'll stand by my statement. I think you showed us that we're gonna be very dependent on groundwater.
Yeah, that, it's true. It is true. And, but you know, the erratic winter storms can be very wet like we've had, and that can actually fill a reservoir in a year. And if we have those every couple of years or, yeah, it's honestly for northern Arizona and Flagstaff, I think it's very hard to predict. With, it's gonna be warmer, but we still get really intense storms and, you know, very wet. We could actually have a wetter future in terms of, you know, upper Lake Mary frequency.
so I think the,
Sorry.
can we see if Walter, this, because he's not here, so we don't know if to answer the question.
Okay.
Send this to him and see what he says and go from there. Unless anyone else is desperate to see this particular graphic.
I share your concern about the projection and, you know, it being based on conjecture. It appears in the original plan, someone might assume you're talking fact here that in the year, whatever, 2045, we're gonna see this distribution of water. I don't know, I'm uncomfortable.
So we,
Yeah,
statistician.
This wasn't sure. I was trying to match what the request was.
Right, no, I appreciate that, and
I'm sorry, this
I see the effort you've put into this, but I'm concerned how it might be used.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that point, right, is if it was an attempt to match the request, but the request is unmatchable, then
Yeah.
I think we can say that.
The other charts are just, it's just pretty boring and we already had it in there. It's just a layer cake chart.
Yeah.
And
That's okay.
if that's okay, that's what we prefer.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask, well,
That's a good question. We're on the water topic and I think might help what you're thinking about, or at least add to it. When we're talking about diversity or change or whatever you want to call it, does surface water, that's like like when I was a kid, we saw a lot less rainstorms in the middle of the winter after a snowstorm. It was mostly just snow. Should that change ground or surface water retention and or aquifer recharge?
having rain in the winter, rain on snow.
Yeah. Does that give us less of an opportunity for it to collect in the basin?
Rain on snow is amazing.
Okay,
For filling the lake.
so climate change is actually helping us there.
Yeah, when it rains in the spring and there's snow on the ground. Yeah, that's a great scenario.
Oh, no, so that's in the spring, so that would have, but I mean, when it happens in the middle of the winter, when all of a sudden we're.
That's
Even-
good too.
That's good too, okay, good.
Then it fills the reservoir sooner, but yeah, this is the one that's just kind of boring. That's like,
The one
good.
that we were at.
This is the level of detail that we're, yes,
Okay, so I think,
with that one? Yes.
okay, but we're glad, thank you for considering it at least. Thank you, Erin, for trying.
I did it.
Very
there.
pretty.
It's just-
Good
but
graphic.
I'm just repeat these patterns, what they
It was
want
a-
me to do.
It
I
was
don't
an
know.
interesting thought exercise, right? And
Yeah.
so. You did great. And I'll follow up with Walter and let him know that was.
We're on to, how many members of the public here, so we'll skip that part, but we're on to summary and anything you need to tell us.
Yeah, so our next meeting is July 10th. We finally got a couple weeks off. We're working on a growth and land use chapter, which that everyone wants to discuss. Hope to send that out to you in July. So sorry, it's part of your weekend. We are, lots of good comments are coming in, lots of really good thinking. And then the internal staff only review of the whole plan is going to be occurring in July, and we'll have a legal review. And then we'll get the whole thing back in August, essentially as a full document, which will be another chance to look at it. Probably when I give you the growth and land use chapter, I think one of the attachments is going to be an outline of all the goals and policies, so you can remember what we've said in all the other chapters, because I think growth and land use, we're kind of, let me describe this. I'm imagining, and this is not an idea that's solid, that it will be probably close to the beginning of the document when we put it all together. But we're reviewing it last, right? Because it's so integral to all the other parts. So I don't want us to forget all the other work. So that's what I think you'll get in your next packet is a growth and land use chapter, and then an outline that says, here's all the goals and policies we have already adopted, have already checked off and worked towards. We did hire, finally, I have a signed contract for the writer editor, which will be Avenue Consulting. I'm very excited to have them on board. They are already starting to go through and rewrite whole paragraphs so that they have a more active voice, and thinking about what kind of graphics could replace paragraphs, or, reorganizing the information. So it's just more visual and easier to digest. We always knew this was the plain text version of the document. But great to have somebody who's really does a lot of technical writing, has great visual skills, and they are starting to work through that material. The last thing, and this is really a to from, is Natalie Pearson from Sustainability and Summer Gandy from Flagstaff Family Food Center did a presentation. A lot of you were able to attend on Monday about food systems and food planning for the region. We discussed at that, and of course, Elsa can send out the link to that with this meeting that we're starting to discuss some revisions to ED6, which was the food policy, because as we told you when we developed that policy initially, there were still a lot of things under review. The economic development plan hadn't finished its draft yet. We were just looking at initial findings. The food systems plan had initial findings, but wasn't fully pulled together yet. So what we'd like to do is just tag ED6 as a parking lot item and know that when you get the full document to review, we're going to have rewritten ED6 a little bit. Just based on the fact that we were working interim, and by the time you see it in August, we should have final. And we just want to make sure that's acceptable and that you don't want to see some other iteration of it by email or something.
We've not done that yet. I don't know that this is a good time to start
Okay.
a whole new process.
Is it okay to bring it back as part of the whole document review and just have it be like a highlighted item, like we changed this one?
Yeah. Whatever.
I have a question, Sarah, before we get finished.
One more thing, but.
Oh, no, after you're done,
The other thing on the parking lot, and I think it was not mentioned, but it's in the written part, but I just want to announce it verbally, is that Elsa and Aaron and our colleagues at USGS are scheduling a webinar on July 1st to discuss groundwater geology and some of your more detailed questions of that. I think we've worked through a lot of those issues, but we're happy still to make sure you feel well informed on that topic.
You'll send out.
Yeah, I'll send out. Gonna be at 11 a.m.
11 a.m., July 1st. That out. So sorry, now you can go ahead with your question.
Oh, we were busy at this meeting last Tuesday, so I had to catch a recap of the council meeting where they had a pretty significant discussion about, those big housing developments. And then their association with the,
Occupancy housing.
yeah,
Yeah.
the layman's terms. And is that going to be addressed next? Are we going to discuss why this, it seems like a little bit of an alarm bell to me from staff. Is that going to be discussed at our next meeting? And
I can just give a quick summary of that right now. So when we adopted the high occupancy housing code amendment, and Michelle, if you're, are you still listening? Can you chime in on with this? She might have logged off. Okay. There are parts of the zoning that tied to the current regional plan. It said if you are in an activity center, you can get these additional processes that allow you to have high occupancy housing. We have been testing that in the real world for 4 or 5 years, and we have this upcoming amendment to how we're going to do future growth illustration work, where we're going from those generalized maps to the parcelized ones, and we're making changes based on the preferred alternative. We need to unlink the zoning code and the regional plan so as to give this committee the maximum flexibility to make those right future land use decisions. Otherwise, there's a risk that changing the future growth illustration could trigger Prop 207 claims or Private Property Right Protection Act claims on private land when we didn't make any changes to the zoning code. We just changed the regional plan. So Tiffany Antal, our zoning code manager, made council aware that those decisions from a few years ago need a look, because it is no other jurisdiction in the state of Arizona has tied their general plan and their zoning code together the way we did. And I think we did it in the name of being expeditious. It is not a good long-term solution because it just doesn't fit the legal framework well. And so that is what we are trying to untangle with Tiffany's proposal to start working on some amendments to that. So it's really a bottom line, like the regional plan is supposed to inspire conformance with our future zoning code changes. It's not supposed to actually define them geographically. That makes sense?
it does to me.
Yeah. And so I was there to answer questions. Council, I think, my understanding in follow-up conversations, council understood, and all they were doing was giving direction for us to bring them back more details on what approach staff would recommend to untangling that issue.
And lastly, if we have any other parts of the plan that could have those type of unintended consequences, we could just bring them to our attention before we start writing the plan or finalizing the plan. It's good to know.
Yeah, and I mean, the issue's in the zoning code, not really in the planning side, right? It's.
Oh, I totally get it. Thank you for the explanation.
And remember, and two, it's a good reminder because of what you just said. Remember, none of the plan that you have seen so far has been to legal review. City and county attorneys are looking at it after you have looked at it. So I hope that by the time we're looking at the whole document, they can't give us legal advice as a committee, but that we can raise any of those other issues, but.
That's why I ask if there's anything else that staff thinks that could be kind of like this, because I'm no expert. I'm just here to give the opinion of a public person.
Yeah, the other thing staff will do, once we get to the point where we sent it out for the 60-day public review, staff will start doing some tests. We'll start coming up with case studies and trying to take them through processes as we've laid them out. And we'll include that in the revisions after the 60-day review, like we tried this situation and we thought about what would happen if we were asked for this kind of application and how would that play out. We're doing a little of that in our own heads right now, but we'll make a more formal effort at it. If anyone has any exciting case studies they'd want to recommend.
Reading that stuff.
Cool. Anyone else got anything? We'll wrap it at 8:40.
Yeah.
All righty. Thanks, guys. Sarah, can you explain that to me?
Last week, we did a work session for council